Welcome back everybody. In this video, we will learn about React component lifecycle. As you all know, React is the most popular JavaScript library for building user interfaces. And it also provides set of lifecycle methods that allows us or the users to interact with our components at different stages. In this video, we will learn about lifecycle phases. In React, in lifecycle, we have four different phases. The first phase is something like initialization phases. Second phase, mounting phase. Third phase, updating phase. Fourth phase, unmounting phase. Initialization phase, where actually our initial properties or the states are going to be set. In this phase, components will be constructed with the help of props and states. Mounting phase is something like, okay, let's try to create a class based component for better understanding. Let me create a class base here. Let's create a constructor which calls implicitly by itself, right? So let's try to have super props as well. Create a state. This is where you're trying to initialize either component with either props or the state. Let's try to initialize with the state. We'll be using the initialization with the state. Here, let me call the first phase, that is initial phase or initialization phase. I will not initialize our state as of now. Let's initialize that later part. So to get it confirmation, let me try to log something within the constructor. This is happening within the constructor, please. Constructor, within the constructor, initialization phase, to confirm that we are calling it. All right, go back to our browser. Here you can see that initial constructor initialization phase. You might be wondering why it is calling for twice. This is because our strict mode in index.js. Let's go back here, our strict mode over here. All right, this is because um, strict mode will this helps us experiencing the um, uh, in double invokes in life cycle methods, and this will help us in identifying the side effects. So this is designed to help the developers to identify the potential issues. If in our case, if you do not want that to be recalled or uh, rendered multiple times, you can remove this React strict mode. This part can be omitted as of now for better understanding. Usually, this happens only in the development phase, but now this recalling or printing for couple times will not happen in a production phase. Please keep in mind that this happens only at an um, development phase. This is just to debug if any potential issues are happening in our code. So let me go back here. Let me go back here. You see that we have only the one time now. All right. So let's come to the second phase, that is called mounting phase. In this phase, when the component is being in basically in the mounting phase, let's let us discuss the second phase, that is the mounting phase. So in mounting phase, um, basically component is being created and inserted to the DOM for the first time. All right. So in mounting phase, whenever the component is inserted to the DOM, it calls inbuilt multiple methods like component will mount, render component did mount. Component will mount is deprecated one. Now let's try to talk only on the render, however, calls by every time. So let's try to concentrate only on the component did mount. So second phase component, let me name this as second phase com, mounting phase. We are talking about this, right? It calls component did mount method. You need not call it explicitly. It itself calls it. Component itself calls it. Basically, what happens in this usually is you will perform the API calls or whatever the necessary data has to be preloaded, that will be done in this part. So let me call that part as in perform API calls in general in real-time scenarios. All right. So, but as of now, I would like to only print something called console.log component component did mount. So this is a mounting phase. It seems I'm writing in the constructor. Let me pull this it out of the constructor. All right, this makes sense. So let's look into that now. So what happens? This also will call the render method implicitly. So in the render we are not rendering anything. As of now, let me render something called hello world. Some h1 tag hello world. To confirm that part, let me have some log over here also. Component did mount will call the render method as well. So let to confirm that part, console.log here render. We are calling render as well when component is mounted. So mounting phase. So mounting phase will implicitly call component did mount and also render. All right, let's go back here. You see that render is also been called. Let me reload my page. Constructor, render, and component did mount. All right. Third step or third phase would be updating phase, where actual update will happen. So let's try to update kind of to keep it simple. The third step is updating here. Let's try to play with our state here. I did not initialize any state here, right? Let me try to initialize a counter one over here, and let's try to update our counter in an updating phase. So increment, it's up to us. Increment counter. What does it does? It tries to implement our state. I mean, increment our state value. Set state dot or else call counter colon this dot state dot counter plus one. This will update our counter value. To get it worked, let's create a button on click. Let's call that increment counter. Right, on click. Let me call here as an increment. The name of our button, event handling, on click. Let's call our increment counter. Right, let's go back here. Let's try to reload. You see that initialization phase render, component did mounted, and it's calling render as well as the console log, which we would like to check it. Let's click on increment. Something going wrong, one sec. Cannot read properties of undefined set state. We are facing this issue like reading set state. All right, it seems we did not binded our method increment counter. Yeah, here you go. We did not bind this. Bind the method increment counter. in the constructor, like this dot increment counter equals this dot increment counter um, dot bind of this. Right, it should work now. Let's go back, clear everything, reload our page. Seems like it's working. You see mounting phase, we did not see that error. We did not render our value here. Let's try to render this part as well. So something like um, p tag. Let's try to destructure this dot state dot counter. Let's try to look into that. Initially 0 now, increment it 1. You see that render mounting phase it called upon, component did mount mounter and the mounting phase again. It always, whenever the state changes or the prop changes, it mounts back. All right, render is called for many times. And let's come to the fourth stage. Fourth stage is unmounting phase. Usually we use this unmounting phase for cleaning up the codes. This unmounting phase is triggered when a component is wanted to remove from the DOM. And also what are the actions, general actions we try to perform in an unmounting phase is cleaning up the opened resources. It calls upon the function called component will unmount. All right. So let's try to log something. Component will unmount. Unmounting phase. All right. Yeah. So cleaning up codes, usually in real-time scenarios, we try to clean up the code. Those kind of tasks will be handled in unmounting phase. Let's try to go back. Yeah. Reload. Initialization. Mounting phase. It calls the render in turn. I'm clicking on increment. This would call upon update phase. Calling again. Calling again. Right. Whenever you are trying to unload this component, then component will unmount will be called. Right. So there, this is how it works, please. The life cycle methods, there are four important phases in it: initialization phase, mounting phase, updating phase, and unmounting phase. Initialization phase, which starts within props and states, what are the values to be initialized with our component loaded. So mounting phase, in which a component is created and inserted to the DOM tree. Update phase is a phase which is triggered when the component state or the prop changes. Unmounting phase is triggered when the component is removed from the DOM. That is all for this video. See you in the next video.